Hey everyone, this is Lomi, and today I'm going to be finishing Firal's outfit with a waist cincher. I spent some time thinking about how I wanted to do this because I've already done a corset that fits her, and most waist cinchers are just an underbust corset. So today we're going to be talking about how to fake it. You can see that I've made a black one. This was what I used to test the pattern and make sure everything was going to fit the way I wanted. It didn't turn out perfectly, but it's a good idea of what it's going to look like when we're done. This waist cincher is going to be made out of one single piece of vinyl. The final version is going to use this brown vinyl. You can see that the brown vinyl is really soft and flexible. It doesn't really matter if your material is super soft and flexible like this, because you can see the black one is really stiff and doesn't bend well at all. However, the material you choose will have an impact on how the cincher looks at the end. The black one is really rigid and holds its shape very easily, while the brown one is a little bit softer and more flexible and fits to the doll's curves nicely. The brown vinyl is backed with felt, while the black one has a woven backing. Once again, this doesn't really matter. The pattern for this is available on my website and is free for personal use, as always. The pattern itself does not have a seam allowance, so I've added 1/4 of an inch seam allowance for these pieces because I want to hem them. But hemming them isn't necessary. You could just cut it out like this, add some decoration, put in eyelets, and call it done. So I'll leave that decision up to you. The construction of this really doesn't take long since it's just one piece. Since I want my cincher to look a little bit more convincing, I do add the seam allowance like I mentioned, and I'm going to start by folding the edges in by about 1/4 of an inch and sewing them down. This will give the impression that the cincher is made out of a bunch of different pieces that have been sewn together, which makes it look a little more authentic. You can see that when I fold these edges in, because I've just expanded the pattern by 1/4 of an inch, I have little peaks and corners that stick out off the sides. It's not really a big deal, they're easy to trim off. I suppose if you really wanted to, you could also add a lining to this. As a note, you can see I'm using really cheap scissors from the dollar store. I never use my good fabric scissors for vinyl and things because I feel like it makes them go dull a lot faster. My expensive scissors are for fabric only. The cheap dollar store scissors work just as well for things like this. If they start to get dull, I can just cut through some crumpled up aluminum foil and they're back to being sharp. Since vinyl has a little bit of stretch to it and is very flexible, I don't have to clip any of the curves to go around these curved hems. I just fold it over as usual, a little bit at a time, and it'll stretch and flex the way it needs to for me to sew this down. While I didn't on the first hems, the ones on the ends, once I do these long hems of the top and bottom, I do backstitch at both ends. The vinyl is folded over so it's 4 layers thick here. Backstitching gives it a little bit of extra strength that keeps that from popping up later. A lot of times when we see doll clothing, it's not real layers. More often than not, it's sewn together in a way that it gives an impression of a lot of layers or a lot of depth, but it's just creatively pieced. You can't have a lot of bulkiness on doll clothes, so sometimes knowing how to fake it with methods like this can really be beneficial to getting a good look for your finished doll outfit. Once those hems are done, I clip off those little corner pieces. You can see I kind of angle my scissors inward. That way there won't be any visible raw edges from the front. Not too shabby. I could go ahead and finish it like this, but I'm going to add a few more lines of stitches. I draw on a few places that I want to add seam lines with a water-soluble pencil. Then these extra seams are put on just with top stitching. I do backstitch at the beginning and the end. Not because this needs to be strong, but because I don't want any of these threads to pull loose, since they're just kind of floating there. When I trim off the loose threads, the backstitching will hold everything in place. It's just a few lines of stitching, but I feel like it adds a lot to the garment. Once again, at any point in this process, you could decide that you're done. I want to add just a little bit more fanciness, so the next thing I'm going to do is use a shaped stitch, or a decorative stitch, to add little scallops along the edge. I add this with regular yellow thread, just as an interesting contrast. When using decorative stitches and things like this, it's important to make sure that you're using a brand new, really sharp needle. On really thick material, such as vinyl, it's very easy for machines to drop a stitch, and then you end up with gaps, which is what happened on the black one that I made first, using an older needle. Once the yellow stitches go all the way around, I think I'm ready to call this done. So I'll mark some places to add eyelets on the front. Just like the black one, I think I'll add 5. I freehand the placement, just kind of guessing what looks good here. Then I use a leather punch to poke holes. Unlike fabric, you don't have to worry about this raveling. I copied the location of the holes onto the other side, and then I punched them too. All in all, this project took maybe about half an hour. I slide the eyelets through the vinyl, and then I'll set them using my crocodile tool. I've used a lot of snap and eyelet pliers before, and the little hammer tools as well, but I feel like this always works the best for me. Setting eyelets is actually the only thing that I use it for, but it works amazingly. If you've never used it, you can see that it has a little retractable peg on one side that fits through the eyelet, and a bump on the other that guides the eyelet as you smash it and causes it to roll back on itself. That way you have a finished look on both sides. The little black cubes are rubber, so it won't mash anything out of shape. And there we go! Our very fake cincher is now complete. I pick a ribbon and lace it shut. My yellow stitches weren't perfect, but I can always go back and clean them up a little bit later. Maybe now that this is done, I can consider going back and adding that embroidery to her shirt. That's all for today though. Thanks for watching. Bye.